Heather, thanks.
You're welcome.
Paul either.
Nope, not yet.
No.
Now you can, and then, yep, got it. And then you're live.
Did that say screaming or?
No screaming yet.
No, it's good.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 PM. Please rise for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call to order this meeting of the Town Council. The first item of business is the council sitting as the Board of License Commissioners will oversee a remonstrance hearing. There is a single matter on that schedule, and that's the application for a Class BV license by Dionysus Acquisition, doing business as Carolyn Sakonnet Vineyard. In addition to the application itself, we have a letter received from Larry Anderson and electronic correspondence received from Miriam Clifford. I'd ask the applicant to present what she has for us.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Cynthia Rocha, and I'm the general manager at Carolyn Sakonnet Vineyard. I'm here tonight to request the approval of a BV license for the vineyard. I just wanted to give a little bit of background and just touch on some of the points I made in the letter that it was included in our application. So I have worked at Sakonnet Vineyard since 2009, and I worked under both Susan and Earl as well as under Carolyn. And one thing that I've been witness to over the years is the commonality of the desire to want to preserve and protect the property that they own, as well as strive to create revenue to support the agricultural and the manufacturing side of the business, which is New England's oldest vineyard and winery, turning 50 years old in 2025. So as part of that, we've also served alcohol responsibly and safely for over 50 years. And with the request for this BV license, are simply looking to add a menu option to our existing cafe that's operated there, where we have served food and wine to our guests over the years. I just wanted to reiterate, I know that I've spoken to some of the council members and also been able to show them the area of the vineyard where we have hosted the cafe in the past, and it would remain in that same area, which is our main tasting room, the adjoining deck. And then we also offer al fresco dining on the lawn directly in front of the cafe when weather permits. So once again, the additional adult beverages we would like to add to the menu would only be available tableside dining in that vicinity of the cafe. So basically, we do appreciate the consideration for this licensing. We do believe it is something that will allow us to remain competitive with other vineyards, to have an additional revenue stream, and to also, of course, offer an additional experience and a well-rounded experience for not only our guests, but the residents of Little Compton as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the council?
No.
Remonstrance? Do you have? Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to say that the vineyard, if they wanted to, could probably have their own distillery and brewery. In saying that, all they want to do is add vodka and tonic or something. And I think it's a worthwhile investment in the town. Certainly, I know better than anybody else that our town needs another place to eat. I mean, we're dying out here. Anybody who it doesn't belong to the Point Club has to drive a half an hour anywhere. I mean, and they're not bothering anybody. They don't have any neighbors. They've got lots of parking. They're not doing music. I'm all for it, and I just think it's a really good idea for our town and our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just gonna give you guys, I've already given you some stuff, don't worry, but I'm just, this is sort of a summary approach I'm gonna try to take to put it down.
Thank you.
And then I've got one for each of you gentlemen. And one for you, Carol.
Thank you.
My name is Larry Anderson. I have previously submitted for the hearing record a May 1st, 2023 letter expressing some of my concerns about this license application. I have also submitted first a copy of a March 16th, 2022 letter from the then zoning official, Peter Medeiros, when a very similar application was submitted last year, and second, a copy of my April 5th, 2022 letter to the town council sitting as Board of License Commissioners when it considered last year's application. I'm going to try to summarize the key points encompassed by those documents. Mr. Medeiros, in his 2022 letter, concluded that according to the Little Compton zoning ordinance, quote, per table 1A use C13, a restaurant is not permitted in a residential zone. At its April 21st, 2022 meeting, the council voted to defer action on an application for a Class BV retail beverage license received from the Vineyard until the Vineyard has determined a resolution to the conflict with our zoning in Table 1A, Principal Use Regulation C13, restaurants, as noted by the zoning official in his letter of opinion. Now, in 2023, the Vineyard has returned with virtually the same application it submitted last year, but apparently without resolving the zoning issue identified last year. It is not clear to me what circumstances, if any, have changed that would enable the council to now grant a Vineyard license. Let me interrupt my own statement to say that I appreciate the efforts by Ms. Rocha as on behalf of the Vineyard and her owners, and I'm not, and I don't disagree with the previous comments about the need for additional facilities in town. But it does not appear, so I'll return to my statement. It does not appear that the 2019 settlement of litigation involving certain uses at the Vineyard found a restaurant to be a lawful pre-existing non-conforming use under Little Compton zoning ordinances. Rather, by my understanding of that litigation and its outcome, which I followed closely, the Superior Court's May 17th, 2019 order memorializing that settlement involved only, quotes, events including but not limited to weddings and concerts. That order does not specifically identify a restaurant as a lawful pre-existing non-conforming use of the property. An ongoing business operation in the form of a restaurant is not equivalent to an event, wedding, or concert. Even if the Vineyard were to assert that restaurant use represented a legal pre-existing non-conforming use of the property, and the council were to accept that assertion, the proposed new use would represent an intensification of that use, I believe, based on their application. Such an intensification, as provided in section 14-2.4F of the zoning ordinance, would appear to be prohibitive. That section provides that a non-conforming use of a building, structure, or land shall not be intensified in any manner. Intensification shall include, but not be limited to, increasing hours of operation, increasing the number of dwelling units, or increasing the seating capacity of a place of assembly. The Vineyard application expressly proposes, as I read it, that the new restaurant use operate year-round rather than seasonally. The ordinance specifically defines increasing hours of operations as a prohibited form of intensification. Finally, both the town council and the Vineyard, under current and previous owners, have had ample opportunities over the years to clarify and permit certain non-agricultural uses on agricultural properties in residential zones, perhaps by special use permit for certain uses. The means for doing so, as I and others have recommended for years now, would be through the process of amending the zoning ordinance, either by a proposal from the Vineyard, which they can do, or by council initiative. Until that takes place, property owners and town officials will be faced with similar licensing and zoning dilemmas and controversies again and again. For now, though, I don't think there is a sound legal basis for the council to grant the applicant's request for a Class BV license. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just make a comment? He says it's a non-conforming use, there's no neighbors, but look at the, on East Main Road, that's a residential area, and we've already let, I forget the name of the lawn company take over there, so that's a non-conforming use there, and it's in a residential neighborhood where the vineyard and the restaurant itself has no neighbors. And I'm not understanding why we would be so against opening a restaurant there, which we've had many meals there in the past. I'm not understanding why we don't want this. I mean, if we're doing non-conforming other things, so.
Okay. Thanks. Yes.
I don't know if you want me to come up there, remain here. Amy Berry, 120 West Main Road. I am a neighbor of the vineyard. I have appeared before this council countless times over the last 10 years since the current owners assumed control of the vineyard. I'm sure at some point you are tired of hearing me speak about the infringements upon my property rights caused directly by the vineyard. Most recently, including projecting obnoxious level of sound onto my property. And I'm not talking about just minimal sound where you can hear it inside my house with the closed windows. To me, that is an obstruction of my property rights. And they did so most recently this year without an entertainment license. And I bring this up to underscore that over the last 10 years, I personally have been before this council again and again and again and again and again due to the vineyard's consistent refusal to comply with any of the directives set forth by the town council, their refusal to comply with our zoning laws, their refusal to comply with even the licenses granted by this town council. And it's always pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope. And I would ask this council to consider what has the vineyard done that would give this council confidence that they're not going to continue to just bulldoze the town and do whatever they want. Because their application may say, oh, we want to use it minimally, or we may only want to serve a gin and tonic once in a while. But we know that's not the case. We know from history repeating itself over the last decade that is not going to be the case. As a directly impacted neighbor who has to contend with this neighbor, I do not wish to obstruct their ability to operate their business or their ability to use their agricultural land. This is a far cry from agricultural use, first of all. And secondly, I don't see the need to expand this, to expand and go beyond what the letter of the law is, what the letter of our ordinance say, and allow them to have this restaurant because, oh, we need an extra restaurant in town. Well, I'm sure the Commons and I'm sure Flounders, I'm sure any other food establishment would say, hey, we would like your patronage too. I think that, it's time that the council hold the vineyard accountable. They haven't done anything that y'all have asked them to do over the last decade. Nothing. They haven't turned down the volume. They haven't curtailed their activities. They haven't done anything that you've asked them to do. So why now give them even more leash to do more? And then it's going to be constant coming back before this council to say, hey, I know you gave them a permit to do a license, but now they're going way beyond that. And now we as neighbors are still impacted and our voices are still at times falling upon deaf ears. So I would just ask you to take a long, hard look at the past 10 years and all the struggles and the hardships and the millions of times you've had to hear me personally speak out about the hardships I've incurred. And I would ask you to deny their license. Thank you.
Councilors, any response?
No, as far as I know, has there been any violations up there? I mean, I keep hearing all this noise and all this, and I was going to Birchard Avenue when this first happened, and when there was complaints by the cops. I couldn't hear it. Every once I heard a drum beat or something like that. but what I'm being told, oh, no, you can't even sit in your house, the windows are blowing out, you know, and I don't see that, okay? So, I mean, would you rather have a vineyard there, or would you rather have a pig farm, or would you rather have housing there? Would you rather have a bunch of housing there, some affordable housing there? Would that be
I would gladly
better?
have a pig farm, and I would gladly have housing, because at least
I
it'll
bet.
be quiet. And I invite you to come to my property, because I understand that you're very contentious and direct at me, like I'm making.
I'm not contentious at you.
My time, but with all due respect, you may come to my house the next time that.
Well, then how come the cops, every time they come to your house, what I'm hearing, oh, yeah, the cops being told to come to your house and the vineyard's been told to shut the music down. So how come there's been no complaints? How come there's been no complaints? That's why you put the noise ordinance in effect. Because why?
Because the music gets turned down conveniently as the cops are.
Oh, so somebody's calling the vineyard and telling them to
But they
shut
can see the
the,
cruisers come up.
Oh, they can,
I guarantee you.
okay. Well, I guess we have a difference of
At
opinion
least
on that.
24 times when the
Okay.
cops have been called. to my
And with
house.
no violations.
No, there have not been.
So
Again,
how,
I invite you.
I mean, it's like somebody going down the road and they speed once in a while, and you tell them, okay, you can't drive anymore because you speed once in a while. And because the cops never caught you. So,
If I could ask you that we return to hearing from remonstrance regarding the specifics of what this application is about.
So I
We're
have,
not talking about, at this point,
noise.
noise levels and those sorts of things.
sorry.
that's okay. I have a comment for the solicitor. Obviously, you need to weigh in on this, so I don't know when you want to.
Here's the thing, it's a public hearing.
Right, do you
I
have,
see someone with a hand raised, I have a
right,
lot.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
But I
go ahead.
don't want
Go
to,
ahead.
don't want to.
Natalie Elias, 21 Birchwood Avenue. Everyone is well aware of what we have gone through concerning the vineyard. Our concern is not whether or not we want them to have a restaurant. Our concern, as it always has been, and the fact that you're arguing with someone about the noise is unacceptable and it's inappropriate. The fact of the matter is that we have continually asked you to protect the neighbors. And if a restaurant was allowed in our zoning, then we wouldn't be here today. So we're asking you not to give someone who has continually harmed their neighbors something outside of the zoning. So I think that's a reasonable request by the people who have suffered for years and years and years. Don't give them something that isn't allowed by our zoning. Whatever has to happen to allow farmers to make a living, that is a whole separate issue. And we don't want people who have farms to not make a living. We want you to hold people accountable and make sure they follow our zoning. That's it.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question, please? Are we not, they're not allowed to do concerts or loud music, is that correct?
That's not before us. We're entertaining.
I'm just trying to, I don't think they're allowed to do that anymore.
That isn't the issue. The issue is we want them to be following our zoning.
Okay, but okay, I'm not.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, I've had a chance to take a look at your zoning ordinance on this matter, and the underlying zone that this property is located in is a residential zone. And a Class BV license is what's known as a Class B victualler license. That means it's a restaurant. And unfortunately, a restaurant use is not permitted in the underlying zone. So in order for the town council to entertain an application of this nature, the ordinance would have to be amended in some fashion to allow for it, perhaps by an overlay a district that could address some of the concerns that you've heard tonight, and this request that you've gotten from the applicant itself. But with the zoning ordinance you have now, this isn't a permitted use, and because it isn't a permitted use, the application for the BV license can't be granted for the restaurant use. So that's the way things stand.
Okay. What is your pleasure with respect to?
Well, I guess we're going to have to deny the application, and I
Oh,
would,
I admit it, yes. But
So
I'm
I'm going to
saying,
make a motion to deny the application.
before you make that motion.
Go ahead.
Solicitor, the last time that this council voted on this was April of 21st, 22. I don't know if you're aware of it, maybe since you've looked at it.
I am, yes.
And the motion was made by, I'm going to say last name's motion, seconded by Mataronis, unanimous vote, to defer action on application for a Class BV retail beverage license received from Diana's Acquisition, Carolyn Sakana Vinny, for premises located at 168 West Main Road, more specifically out of a building address of 53 Weiner Road, as newly numbered by the E-911 system, until the Vineyard has determined a resolution to the conflict with our zoning found in 14-3.1E, Table 1-A, Table of Principal Use Regulations, C-13, restaurants, as noted by the zoning official in his letter of opinion. So that's the last time that was brought to us. This body voted unanimously. What has happened since then? Nothing?
Not that I can ascertain, but I can tell you that the zoning that was in place at that time is still in place. And after taking a review, because I don't think you had an opinion at the time, but in me taking a look at it, it's just not something that can be permitted. Now, I understand that you have a farmer winery license there. That's a state license. It's appropriate, notwithstanding what the zoning is, and that's under a separate statute, which is the Right to Farm Act. However, this is a separate use. So I can understand why an applicant of this nature would come forward and say, we already have a farmer winery license and now we want to expand on it. But when I look at the licensing scheme that the state has under Title III, Chapter 7, it's not something you can do. This is a separate use. And because it's a separate use, the underlying zoning regulations and the underlying zone applies. So to me, this can't be entertained by the council under the current zoning regulations you have. The zoning ordinance would have to change in order to accommodate a request of this nature.
So separate uses, is that another term for non-conforming use?
Well, here's the thing. There's a consent judgment that was entered that recognized a non-conforming use. And when I examined the judgment that was entered in the court, this particular issue, a BV license, wasn't addressed, rather, I'm sorry. That means then that it's outside of that consent judgment. That's why it's addressed under the zoning ordinance, and that's what would need to happen to go forward. The regulations would basically have to change.
So how do we start the process of going and changing the zoning?
Patrick, I'm going to withdraw my motion and make another motion, and it'll entertain what you're trying to do.
I can actually answer the question. Basically, what would happen is one of two things, and Mr. Anderson is correct. You could either entertain a petition from an applicant to change the zoning ordinance, or it can be initiated by the town council itself. From there, after the preliminary, it would go to the planning board to determine whether or not it complies with the comprehensive plan. Then there would be a public hearing on the zoning amendments. Then the town council would take a vote. And I'm going to say this. There are other rural communities in Rhode Island. These issues do come up, particularly with agricultural uses, perhaps not with wineries because there's not that many of them in Rhode Island. However, there are similar uses, orchards, things of that nature, where zoning regulations have been amended to accommodate what is considered to be standard practice so that those types of businesses can thrive.
If we deny this and we make a motion to send it to zoning, do you anticipate litigation from the vineyard?
They may, and if that happens, that happens. But I'm confident in the advice that I'm giving you, that it's the correct advice, and that if there is an appeal, that the town would be successful in that endeavor, particularly with the zoning regulations that you have.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion to defer this, basically the same motion that we made that you were speaking of. And ask the solicitor to look at our own ordinance language and come up with what his thought might be to allow this to go forward, whether it's an overlay district or by ordinance, and come back to the council and then go to the planning board, whatever the legal avenue is to do it.
Solicitor, do we need a motion, since I know it might be Groundhog Day here, but we have one on the books and nothing's happened?
Well,
Do we
actually,
need another motion, the same motion?
actually, I view this as not as the same application that was filed. I think what happened is as time marched on, a new application was filed and should be addressed.
This is what you're talking about right now.
Correct, yes.
Can I just say something? I just want you to know, from that application and that motion that was made, there were attempts on my end to make contact with zoning, and you were in between zoning, so there was no official in place. So I had multiple communications with the town to try to meet with someone to try to get some guidance as to what the next steps would be. So I just need to have that on the record, that we did not do nothing. There was just a void within the town in terms of zoning to be able to proceed further.
I'm new too, so.
As it has been unfolded here, action can either be by the applicant to request that zoning be changed, and you're saying that those efforts initiated with no zoning official didn't go anywhere. Is that accurate?
No, I mean, I finally met
Mr. Simmons,
in place, but at the time, directly following that, we had made efforts to take the next steps.
Yes.
There was, Mr. Maderas had left, and there was an interim, and then that person was not meeting with anyone. There was a little bit of a, transition in that department, so.
What would be the proper protocol for the applicant to follow in order to request that change? Would they have to come to the council, or should they be going to the zoning official? Or if we were to deny the license tonight and ask that we put it on the applicant to start the process?
Here's the thing. To me, the initial starting point would not be Mr. Simmons, because his job is really to enforce, as opposed to come up with new regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I think that's what's necessary here. So it's not an interpretation of the zoning ordinance. It's not something that he should be charged with doing. It's unfair to him. So there's one of two ways that you can proceed. The first way is the applicant here can file a petition to amend the zoning ordinance. That would get the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
They would come up with what regulations they thought was would be necessary to accomplish their goals.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to do it. The other way to do it would be for the town council on its own initiative to come up with regulations that they feel are appropriate for this use, or for perhaps other uses of an agricultural nature.
Mm-hmm.
The analogy would be the movement that we made in the boundary of the business zone in order to establish the property on Willow Avenue as being eligible for increased density.
Yeah.
We took that initiative. And frankly, that was my sense from your motion, unless I misheard you.
No, that was the sense of my motion, to defer this and allow the solicitor to come up with his thoughts on ordinance changes to allow this to go forward.
I don't mind doing it, and it's part of the flat fee, and in some ways, I think it's better because it'll give you more control as to what the preliminary document is that would go out to planning board and the public.
I do think that if we're going to go down that route, that we should be coming up with an ordinance that's a little more broad than just specific to the vineyard, because I think that we have a lot of different farmers in town, and I think that we should be coming up with an ordinance or regulations that can apply to all of our farmers and give them the same opportunities across the board, not just one organization in town.
I think that was what you would probably do.
Okay.
Yeah,
with an
we-
overlay district and then come up with ordinances to
Correct, yes, and.
fit situations like this for all agriculture establishments.
That's correct, and again, pardon the analogy, but you're not gonna be plowing new fields here. Because, other communities have gone through this. It's a big issue with ag in this part of the country. So it's not something where we're gonna reinvent the wheel or invent the wheel.
Have been relatively unsuccessful at getting agriculture to the point where we've had meaningful legislation or ordinances come out of that, not due to a lack of effort, but due to the diversity of that. I would only caution that by diversifying this, and I acknowledge what you're saying, is that there'd be an advantage to solving more than one problem at a time. But I think the initiative to create and then refer to the planning board for their evaluation, to the zoning board for their approval, is the proper way to go with this. And we have the impetus once again to those who have said we haven't done it fast enough. That complaint is heard, that's understood. Often there are reasons for that, but I think it's going to be important that we create an overlay structure that could be applied more generically than simply to this, but could be applied to this. So as to say, in the residential zone, in essence, here's how one goes about getting authority to do ... whatever that might be. And that, of course, is also subject to a public hearing and lots of discussion. I can be absolutely certain of that. There will be all sorts of opinions on that because anything that generic is suspicious by its very nature. It's presumed that, okay, what could really happen if we do this? So hence there's this decision that comes about that says, should we really broaden it out and make it a one size fits all? Be careful, because that one size fits all, someone is going to apply to a thing that we haven't thought of. So it's just that balance and that often tempers, so we end up not doing anything at all. And that criticism is taken. I take that criticism. That's fine. That's part of what we do. But we want to be careful not to be either presumptuous, which is not often the charge, or absent, which is the charge that many have made, that we get presented with a problem and we don't do anything with it. So I think the motion that's before us is an appropriate move in that direction. But I didn't have it seconded. I didn't hear it.
Is there a second?
Can I hear the motion again? We got an arm raised.
Second. Do you want to hear the motion now or have the, okay. Gary said to defer decision on this application using the language from the 2022 prior vote, and ask the solicitor to look into our zoning and make a recommendation for an overlay structure.
I'll second your motion, Gary.
Thank you.
All right, motion is made and seconded. Yes, sir.
I think that's an appropriate act. I would just, as you noted, I would just remind, I was on the council at the time, Gary and Bob, when, this is now in 2019, when the planning board, at our request, came forward with a comprehensive accessory agricultural ordinance provision. 2019 was a year before COVID. There was a response from existing farmers, understandable. We sent it back to the planning board. There was some work, it dropped. They had a whole year. We didn't press it. The planning board didn't proceed with it. COVID hit, that's 4 years ago. So there was some pushback, but I think Andrew's point, there is really, the zoning ordinance in this area, the provision of the ordinance has not been revised since 1994. That's 30 years ago. The Right to Farm Act has ramified since that time. Many of these towns have amended their ordinance simply to conform to the Right to Farm Act. They just pulled the language out of the Right to Farm Act and put it in our ordinance as a starting place, so that those uses which are permitted under the Right to Farm Act are clearly stated in our ordinance, and then you work from there, as other towns have done, to look at other uses that treat either overlay areas or zoning districts and all agricultural operations in the same way. We want to be wary of doing sort of a spot zoning approach to this for one property owner. And I will say frankly, to other points that have been raised, that it would be useful if the vineyard, with all respect, tried to reach out to the other farmers to see if there's a consensus that can be created among the agricultural community that will involve some compromise. If there rather than a divided agricultural community, if there were an agreement, if there were consensus among them about what was acceptable, it would go a long way to make your job easier. But that's not the way this is played out. You've got existing farmers, and the vineyard has not, frankly, has not been a good neighbor. I mean, with regard to how it's responded to the complaints over these years under the current owner, with all respect.
We'll try and graft that on. Excuse me? Try and graft that on.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Are you ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you for the work you've done on this, and thank you for the comments that we've gotten that'll inform how we proceed. The next item in the remonstrance hearing is to be continued in that the request for transfer is not mature for consideration.
Yes.
Is that a motion, Bob?
Yes, I move that we defer action on Simmons Cafe and Marketplace.
Second.
Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. By way of announcements, first, Councilor McHugh would like to make an announcement.
Yeah, I just want to very quickly talk about a resolution that this council voted on, and I'll read it quickly. A resolution opposing House Bill H 5037 and Senate Bill S 0198, an act relating to fish and wildlife aquaculture, whereas the bills are, I can't say that word, what's that word? Thank you.
Antithetical.
Thank you. To successful aquaculture, to locally established zoning and the Right to Farm Act, whereas there was insufficient notice to the town nor consult with Harbor Commission, and whereas forcing farms further offshore will negatively impact the environmental benefits, including reduction of ecosystems, nutrient loading, whereas arbitrary resetting of farms in deeper water increases the likelihood of use or conflicts with boats and recreational fishermen, and whereas the bills are contrary to declared state and federal interests and prior economic policies and investments, and whereas the result will surely be fewer farms, a departure from historic and cultural use of the Sakonnet River, and reduce access to local seafood. Now therefore, let it be resolved that the Little Compton Town Council opposes House Bill H 5037 and its counterpart, Senate Bill S 0198, acts relating to fish and wildlife aquaculture, voted on this 23rd day of February 2023 by the Little Compton Town Council. And I'll just quickly, this is about the Bowen brothers. They've been on the Boston Globe, Providence Journal, New Bedford Standard Times, Sakonnet Times. I don't know what paper you haven't been in. I just want to quickly let you know where the path is of their application for their oyster farm. And it started in 2021. They went to the Rhode Island Shellfish Advisory Panel, which they satisfied, was satisfied there. Secondly, it went to the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council for their approval. It was approved. It then went to the CRMC staff. It was supported and approved by the CRMC staff, signed by its executive director of the CRMC, Jeffrey Willis. Then on 5/11/21, it went to the CRMC Council. So CRMC has a staff and a council for a hearing. The hearing was halted due to a technicality. The Rhode Island Marine Fisheries didn't include the word recommendation. Well, they have to do that. So it was halted and continued. The hearing would be continued for clarification of the word recommendation. On 6/22/21, CRMC Council met again, and the Rhode Island Fisheries gave their recommendation, put the word in there. granted, what they also did at that meeting, they granted continuance by the executive director, Jeffrey Willis, for the Bowens. That was on 6/22/21. The Bowens have not heard back from the CRMC. It's almost been 2 years now, to continue their continuance or to resume their hearing from May 11th, 21. So it's been 2 years. And when that happened in June is when Save Sapowit got together. Lots of letters were written. A very high-powered attorney was hired by Save Sapowit, from my understanding. And the House bills that are in this resolution were crafted. One by Lou DePalma in the Senate, one by Jay Edwards in the House. They have already had testimony in both of these bills, and they're sitting there for a vote. So just a couple of things. I think that the Bowens have been wronged here. I think that the lawyers for the CRMC and the lawyers hired by these folks in Sapowit that live there are trying to grind these folks into submission and delay them. And they've done that now for 2 years. And the two bills that we talk about here that we don't agree with are ready to be sent for a vote, but they haven't been. And my opinion is because they don't have the votes to do it. It would be declined, and it wouldn't go forward, and the Bowens would succeed. So I just wanted, that's how I hope, I don't know if that's right, Sean Bowen, but it's the closest that I've got from all the articles I read and everything that I saw. I think there's a political, I think it's quite clear, this is a political game going on. And I think John Edwards is involved. I think Lou DePalma is involved. I think they want their votes in Tiverton. And so I think that's what's going on here. And I do have a question, you know, I think it begs the question, and I'm not a CRMC expert for sure. You know, do these applications sit for 2 years? Is this a regular practice of the CRMC? I don't know. Our solicitor would know that answer. I don't know if he's bound to answer that question, but I will ask you that question.
It depends on the application.
Are there applications sitting there that are 2 years old, or is this the only one?
There's some that are older.
Older?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anything I missed, Sean?
I just wanted to say something really quick. In addition to having an application before CRMC, I'm also a huge aquaculture proponent. It's a very efficient form of farming and food production. I applaud the council for taking a proactive stance on that. So thank you. The bills, although they're about our application, they're not about our application. They have a bigger, a broader reach than just us. So I really appreciate the council looking at aquaculture and seeing it as a viable form of agriculture, which it is. So thank you.
Thanks. Any other announcements?
I'd just like to say one thing. Andrew, Patrick, when you have something like that, can you put it on the agenda so we can?
To be fair, he asked that it be part of the agenda. And,
Okay.
and I had told him I would put bring the completed resolution, which I've done, but he asked that he have the opportunity to speak.
Okay, all right. Just so that we all can feel comfortable, because I'd like to, I support the Bowens, obviously. I think aquaculture is a good, safe way to, fish, I guess you'd call it fish. And plus, every oyster cleans 50 gallons of water every day. So if thousands and thousands of oysters are up in the Sakana River, I don't see how it could harm the Sakana River. It's actually cleaning the river.
Thank you. The next item of business is approval of the minutes of April 20th.
Motion to approve the April 2023 minutes as written, unless anybody has any comments or questions.
Second.
Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have department head reports from the building inspector, zoning official, from the clerk, from the fire chief, from the tax assessor, and from the administrator.
Motion to place all department head reports on file unless anybody wants to pull one for for questions or comments.
I'm gonna pull one.
I'll second it.
Is there a second? All right, go ahead.
Yes, the town administrator, just a quick question on a local solar.
Yes.
Says we have come to a consensus that the school's project will go forward under the superintendent's supervision. And reading from the minutes from our last meeting, we voted to authorize the town administrator to coordinate with the school department to submit a special use permit for installation of a solar on the roof of the school. And the second thing we voted on was to task the town solicitor with the school draft an agreement for solar to be installed on the school roofs. So I see the word consensus. I mean, that's all I voted on with those two things. And the rest of us did. So it says, did the town administrator coordinate with the school department to submit a special use permit for installation for solar on the roof?
I did hold a meeting with the school department, and we discussed that. And still pending exactly how to proceed, but we did discuss that, though.
Okay. And to ask the town solicitor, was the school draft an agreement for solar to be installed on the school roofs? Was that done?
No, it hasn't been.
Okay, so could you just bring me up to date, solicitor, on where this stands?
Well, is it okay in the answer if I defer out to the council president? Because I think there's been some other issues that have come up, and I think it's appropriate to discuss it at this time.
I'll allow you deferment.
I like to defer.
Just don't defer it down here.
As you're aware, one of the proposals that was part of this package of discussion was that we would schedule a special town meeting to consider solar on the school in the same evening as the annual financial town meeting. I made the decision that we were not sufficiently mature with revenue identification to be able to say, this is how we're going to proceed with both the $17 million town budget and the much smaller, albeit significant, investment in solar. I was concerned that we were double counting money from a source and saying, this is going to be used to pay for it. No, this is going to. And it was only accentuated by the fact that in the discussions between the school and the town, it was not clear to me that we were talking about money that would be spent and that would be done. Rather, it was seen as, we'll spend it, but then you reimburse us. So that's why the slowdown in that process occurred, because I was not confident that we would not jeopardize the performance of the annual financial town meeting by trying to resolve this ancillary piece that had to be scheduled alongside it in the same budget committee report, et cetera. So that decision was mine, and that's why I made it that way.
Solicitor, I would just quickly ask you, the vote that was taken by the council to have a special town meeting, does that open this council up to any violations?
No.
Thank you.
Any other issues with the department head reports? Are you ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, sir, you have a question?
It's not clear where your understanding of use of funds said, no, I think we gotta do it this way. Where is that documented? Or is there a plan? Or is it a problem right now? It's just.
If I could say it again, and maybe in a different way, we were faced with the fact that we have an annual financial town meeting scheduled on a certain day, which we deferred to that date. So I was anxious to ensure that we did not jeopardize our ability to receive Department of Revenue authority for our advertisement, which we have not yet gotten. We have gotten a commitment that it will be produced by Monday, which will be the day that we need to submit our material to the newspaper for the ad in advance of the meeting. And that's the last day it can go in, because it has to be in that newspaper. Those are the kinds of things that my assignment as chief elected official entails. That's what I'm supposed to do. So I look at it and say, can we do both of these things, acknowledging that my fellow counselors have said this is what we're going to strive to do. Let's be clear, nobody said that if we don't get solar on the school by the end of 2023, the game is over. There was no such urgency to that. There was an urgency to the financial town meeting. I gave it priority over the other, and it was simply that. I'm going to step away from that only because we're into areas that aren't on the agenda. They aren't part of the conversation, and we want to be sure that we're following what we said we're going to talk about. I have a request from Chief Petron to appoint Jason De Silva to permanent member of the Little Compton Fire Department.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The Little Compton Zoning Board of Review application form has been revised and approved by the board, and our acknowledgement is requested.
Generally, when there's something like this changed, they'll have whatever was changed italicized, so we're aware of it. And without looking at the previous one, I'm not sure what got changed. Do you have any knowledge of what was changed on this?
I can say that I know that the fact of it, including an email, was added. That was noted to me, but other than that, I don't know what else is.
You don't know what they changed on this, so.
Now requesting email information, the planning and zoning board secretary mentioned when she gave it to me, but I don't know what else, Gary.
Would you like to see what you're accustomed to seeing? A marked up version?
Yeah, I would like to see it, but I mean, I have some hesitation to, even though this was approved by the zoning board, which it's an application for the zoning board. I mean, I don't want to approve something till I see what it previously was and the change they made, so.
To be fair, it's not asking us to approve it. This is their information to us.
You don't need to approve it, Gary.
Okay.
In other words,
It's a
they're
courtesy
saying,
copy.
Okay.
we have changed our application form, so when you see it, this is what it looks like. Your
Okay.
question's a fair one, and we can certainly do that. We can get the markup that shows what changed.
Would it be possible for the clerk to ask for
Sure.
something to give to the council, what the changes were on this, so we can be aware of it? Thank you very much.
So the
Motion to place on file.
Second?
motion, there's a motion to place on file subject to the request that a synopsis be provided in the second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. A request letter from Robert Watt to consider a welcome resolution for Golden Rule Peace Ship.
Motion to, I think he gave us some sort of a resolution here.
Yes.
I don't have a problem supporting this. I mean,
What's requested is that all 39 cities and towns have available for presentation a welcome resolution upon arrival of this.
Golden Rule
I
sailboat.
think it's correct to say it's referred to as a ship in some places, a boat in other. I'm experienced in that, and a ship is a boat, or a boat is a ship, as far as I'm concerned, but I know that flies in the face of,
Unless it's a vessel.
it might be a vessel.
All right, then I'll make a motion that we pass a resolution using their template here.
Second.
And I'll note that we passed a resolution about nuclear proliferation a few years ago under the recommendation from a local resident
Yes.
running Tierney. So it kind of follows up that same idea.
So one more time on your motion, it is to,
Pass a resolution using the template that they provided to us.
And I second that.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Heather. Consider rescheduling the June 2023 council meetings from June 8th and 22nd to June 1st and 15th. This will have the effect of every couple of cycles, every 2 to 3 months, there is a 3-week period between council meetings. This would move the 3-week period between council meetings from the interval between May and June to the interval between June and July. Other than that, it has no
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
And a draft resolution in support of enabling legislation authorizing tax amnesty periods for municipalities is in your package for you to tell me to execute.
Motion to approve and have the council president sign. Does the tax assessor want to speak on this?
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
I would prefer not to second my own draft.
I'll second it.
Yep, all right. Yes. No, she,
Okay.
okay. Motion made and seconded to execute the resolution as written. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Communications, a request from Offshore Brewing to obtain a mobile food establishment license permit to be located at South Shore Beach.
You know, I'm not sure whether, I mean, I know there's an ice cream cart down there and a hot dog cart down there, but I'm not sure it's a good idea to start pushing beer down on a South Shore beach.
It's not fair.
It's not beer.
Coffee again, Gary, coffee.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess you can brew
It's
coffee.
already been
It's already been granted by the beach commission.
Okay,
November.
And I'll make a motion to approve with
And
all
I'll se-
state and local.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded to approve the aforesaid license. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? A request from Rural Service Station to obtain a holiday sales license.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Request from Trolley Stop Ice Cream to obtain a holiday sales and a victualling license.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Request from Chicken Trailer. Chicken Trailer is with us this evening to obtain a mobile food establishment license permit to be located at 361 West Main Road.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, I need you to consider something. There are only 5 mobile food establishment licenses. We did that when we first comported with state law regarding mobile food establishments. We wrote into the ordinance the following wording. I've got it here. That allows the council to change the number. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to change the number of licenses from 5 to 6.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And now, sir, your motion.
I'll make the motion to request a mobile establishment license permit.
I'll second that, but I have a question for Andrew. Is it Andrew? Is this going to operate up, the one that's up around the corner right over here?
Yep.
And that's where you're going to operate this from? Okay.
Any further discussion?
So would this be considered a home business, home occupation? Because that's a residential area again, right?
Right.
It's with a mobile food cart.
A mobile food establishment is allowed to vend in a residential area.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I just didn't want you to get your call back in here again. So
Any
it's
other
been moved and
discussion?
seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The abatement list.
You want to speak on this? Since you came here, you might as well say something.
Two, one is basically, the gentleman who was working in the hobby than a business. So, when he first applied, he was quite, thinking he was gonna be more of a business. And he was not registered as a business on the Secretary of State's website, so he has been in business. So, and the other one, just failed to file with me when they closed their business.
So basically, there's 2 businesses, one closed in 2018 and one closed in 2012. So I'll concur with the tax assessor and move we approve the abatement list.
Second.
Discussion on that. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks for the work on that. The consent file.
Motion place consent file unless anybody wants to hear or speak on anything.
Second?
Mr. Clemo put something in from the wind farms. I didn't know whether he wanted to speak on it, seeing you're here tonight. It never got put on the consent calendar.
Yeah, not yet. I'm not prepared.
Okay, all right. So motion approve the consent calendar unless anybody wants to pull anything for discussion.
It's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then the payment of bills.
Motion to pay the bills as presented.
Second?
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. There being no further matters before the council, the meeting is adjourned.